Before jumping into the stuff that you guys, I guess, wanted to go over, just like things to be aware of that are like good to know in Maya. Those will probably help you in the long run and or would be useful for your final. So the first thing is referencing. Oh God. Buds, no. What have I done? Okay. I don't know what I just pressed. Crap. Okay. That was weird. Sorry. Alright, so the first thing is referencing. And basically what referencing does, it's more or less the same thing as doing file import, where it'll take a file and like bring said objects into your scene. But the beauty of referencing is that if you're familiar with coding at all, it's kind of the same thing as like basically putting a pointer to a file where it'll like continue, if you update that file, it'll continuously update your stuff. So I'm just gonna like make a really crappy, like ugly file with like a cube and a cylinder in it, and it's gorgeous. And I'm gonna save this file, and apparently just call this thing3. So I have my great thing3 file. I'm gonna make a new file, and I'm gonna create a reference to that file that I just made. So if you go to File, Create Reference, or just do Control R, and I'm just gonna, it's gonna ask you to, find the file that you're looking for. So I'm going to thing3, and you can see that it's brought in my items. So, like, surface-wise, this pretty much looks like doing a file import. But you'll notice, so right here, it's basically labeled everything with the file name. So instead of just being psphere1, it's thing3 psphere1, thing3 pcylinder1, etc. And then anything that's been referenced into your file is going to have this little sort of blue like diamond next to it in your outliner. And you'll actually not be able, like if I try to delete that object from my scene, you can't do it. You can hide it, so just do like Control H, it's going to hide it in your outliner, Shift H to reshow it. But you can't remove anything that's been referenced into your scene. That would be a thing, you would have to go into the original file and do that. So just like if you ever, by default, it's going to name the stuff like the file name, colon, and then whatever was named in your file. If you don't like that, presumably, like possibly because like if you're like me, I have really long file names, like I'll name something like Tristan version 37 cloak start texturing, and I do not want that showing up in my outliner because that's going to be awful. So if you go into your reference options, and again, it's just like File, Create Reference, little tool settings. You can go in, I ignore most of the stuff, and then this option here for use namespaces. So by default, use namespaces basically says preface any object name from the file that you're referencing with the name of the referenced file. In this case, it was thing3. So if I uncheck that, it's going to basically pull up this little dropdown, which is saying file name is pretty much the exact same thing it was doing before, so I'm not really sure why that's like the option they give you. But if you set it to this string, it's going to resolve all of the nodes instead of with the file name with whatever you type in here. So I could type in banana, or I could type in just like something. I usually just leave it as like something short that's not going to, suck up space in my outliner. It really doesn't matter what you use. Just be aware, so true story. I was doing a freelance job once, and I may have made that string goober, and now we trade files, and now he literally has coded stuff into his program to look for things that are called like goober underscore whatever, because that's how I set up my reference. So probably do make it logical, and if you're working for a client, don't make it something stupid or crude or random, in case they ever see it. But anyway, so that's more or less how you set up a reference. Any questions on any of that so far? All right. So I'm just going to go ahead really quick and like just make this ginormous and rotate it and maybe like pull this up in the air and add a ground plane. And recently I've taken to using just physical skies for things because they're slightly nicer by default, and I'm too lazy to plug in an HDRI half the time. So these are fun. I'm not going to super go over these in class because they're like fairly straightforward to learn, but they do, I'll just render this out for you really quick. They do, by default, look a little bit nicer and give you a little bit more dimensional lighting than a standard dome light. You can see that there's like at a minimum, there's a shadow from this ball. Whereas like a dome light, everything would pretty much be flat, and it would just be kind of awkward looking. But anywho, so I'm going to save this scene. I'm going to call this scene 3. I'm not doing everything 3 because you guys are section 3, and it helps me keep myself organized. So I'm going to go back into my original file now, the one where I first made this sphere and this cylinder. And I guess that was thing 3. Sure, save that. Okay. All right, so we have this. And let's say that maybe I am not quite happy with the shape of this sphere. Maybe I want this to be, you know, something more. What am I doing right now? Maybe I want, you know, this to sort of be extruded randomly out the top and to have some other like interesting stuff here. I'm going to turn this into like a robot ball joint or something weird. Do something weird like that. And then maybe I want this to have some kind of texture on it. What was your name for attendance? Sorry. Kai? Okay. Thank you. I'm learning very slowly. Alright. So just like random texture. Not going to do anything terribly fancy. I'll just put, I don't know, put a ramp shader on here. One day I'm going to figure out like a default way to just like start with a rainbow ramp shader, because that will be a magical, magical day. And I have not actually applied that, have I? Boop. Alright. And I'll just be like, cool. Here's my trippy, gross looking ramp shader. And then maybe I want a pyramid somewhere, just like wherever. Don't really care. Cool. So if I'm happy with this, I'm just going to go ahead and save this. And I'm going to go back into my the scene file that I just made, so scene 3. And you'll notice that it's actually gone through and like added all of this other stuff into my scene. So I have, I do have that surface shader with that texture on it. The shape of my sphere has changed, and I have this like weird little pyramid thing that I added. So you will notice that like the sphere is sort of clipping through and like not doing what it was in the original scene, and that's because originally I had moved this sphere up, and I just haven't moved this one up, so if I like drag it up, it'll be pretty much in place. But you can see, so it's again, it's like pretty much brought in all of the changes that I made in my original file, which is really powerful, especially for stuff like rigging. So a lot of times they'll use, you'll have a single file with just like the finished rig where you're not animating, you're not doing anything to it, it's just there. And you'll reference that into another scene where you'll animate on it and do whatever you're doing. Because if y'all ever get to rigging, it's like super annoying and prone to breaking, and if you animate on it, it makes it like 100 times harder to change the whole thing. So referencing is really good for stuff like that. It's also really good if you use it for your final. So what I recommend doing is setting up a scene where you can reference like one scene for each of your main objects that you're making, so like hero object, furniture, decorative, and then a scene where you're just sort of like building your environment, and then in that environment scene, reference in all 3 of your objects. So that way, as you go through the process of updating those models and the textures, it's just going to automatically bring all those changes into your final scene, and you're not going to need to, you know, throw in new textures and like reset everything up and like remove your object and scale it every time you make a change and like need to do a weekly assignment. It'll also make your life way easier for like swapping out group stuff. But yeah. So any questions on any of this referencing stuff so far? Cool. Just one more thing I want to make you guys aware of really quick. So, again, for those of you that are like into coding stuff, I mentioned it kind of works like, well, actually, no, maybe not. I forget. It's been a while. But basically what it's doing is Maya's just like, here's my reference. I'm looking for a file called whatever the file name is when you originally created it. So in this case, I'm looking for a file called thing3. Blah, blah, blah. All right. Where am I saving this right now? Oh, dang it, sorry. 5 seconds. Oh, yeah, all right. So, again, my file is originally thing3. If I take this and rename it something like thing35, ooh, God, no. I have a deep and abiding paranoia about putting extra periods in my file names. I don't know if that's warranted or not, but anyway. So thing3 has become thing35. So I'm just going to reopen the scene that I'm in right now, and you'll notice that it pulls up this little error here. Basically, it's saying, hey, I was looking for a file called thing3.ma, can't find that file, what do you want me to do? So you can ignore it, and that's just going to basically just say scrap your reference, and it's not going to put any of the stuff from that file in. I'm going to reopen that scene. You can also, if you hit browse, so retry is just going to basically keep trying until you give up, because probably it's not going to find it. You can also browse around and find a different file. So in this case, if I just set it to thing35, it's going to bring in all my stuff from that other file. So just be aware that if you do change the name of your file, it's going to throw an error with your reference. And yeah. So if you guys choose to use referencing for your final, what I would recommend doing is having basically like a little folder or like some organized way of stashing files that you're referencing. So you might name it like hero for reference or something like that, decorative object for reference. And then you'd have sort of running parallel to that, you just have, hero object version 1, hero version 2, hero version 3, and that's where you sort of actively work on the stuff that you were doing. And if you wanted to sort of update that, however your object was in your environment scene, you would just override the hero object for reference file. Because all it's looking for is a file name. It doesn't care what's in the file. It's just going to drag it into your scene. And that way it allows you to still reference your stuff in, but also have more than a single version of your file. So again, if your one file gets corrupted, you lose everything, but if you have versions, you can still go back to something previous and not lose everything. So that's pretty much referencing. Does that make sense? Does anyone have any questions about that? All right. So again, I would highly recommend using referencing for your final. It's going to make your life probably much easier. Just also be aware, so if you guys are like submitting stuff to me and you have referenced files, they need to be, when you submit them, they need to be in the same spot in your folder that they are on your computer, if that makes sense. If you switch them to like a different folder, or you like change their names, or if you don't include them at all, the references aren't going to show up on my end, so I won't be able to look at those. Most of the time this isn't a huge issue, but again, just something to be aware of.